My name is Bradley Busetto, and I'm director of the UNDP Global Centre for Tech, Innovation and Sustainability in Singapore. The COVID pandemic is even more devastating in the developing world, where health and welfare systems are much shakier to begin with, and so many jobs are informal and unstable too. And so in this context, we want to figure out how we can create a global effort to spur local, urgent, and cheap innovation in some of the most vulnerable countries in the world, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and poorer parts of Asia. Maybe we can call it crowdsourced frugal innovation, all at speed. So what did we do? We designed a global open source innovation initiative called the COVID-19 Detect and Protect Challenge. And we focused on solutions that would help communities detect the virus or protect themselves from it. And so far, the response to the challenge has been astonishing, both in terms of the number and importantly, the quality of the submissions, but also the efforts from the broader global tech and maker community. Participants from all over the world have built from scratch thermal detectors and contactless thermometers, 3D printed face shields, automatic sanitizer dispensers, and much more. Most of these solutions are cheap to produce, with some costing only $10 to make, and they're easy to build, highly replicable, using only a handful of components. And we wanted to go beyond immediate response and really think about recovery too. And so this includes thinking more holistically about the infrastructure, tools, skills, and know-how to function and flourish in a post-COVID-19 world. And so in the next few minutes, we'd like to take you through how we created this challenge, and we'll talk about our approach, what we learned, and hopefully provide insights for others looking to apply global efforts at a local level at speed. So there were three parts to this. First, we explicitly focused on hardware solutions, because others in the global community were already really working on digital innovations, and in fact, sometimes digital work can be especially hard to implement in poorer parts of the world with really limited digital infrastructure. Compounding issues include issues around digital literacy, limited tech ownership, and a lack of internet and mobile connectivity in general. So here we wanted to bring the best hardware development expertise and innovation that the world had to offer right down to the local level. We wanted to engage an international community made up of innovators, inventors, scientists, researchers, and entrepreneurs, and hobbyists too. And the aim was not just to create one-off solutions, but also help grow local expertise and tech ecosystems, which are hugely important for longer-term recovery from the pandemic. The second thing is we wanted to focus on low-cost and low-resource and open-source solutions. So we tapped into a global movement of makers, civic hackers, and innovators. And our challenge became a truly democratized effort, with citizens, students, academics, companies, and hobbyists all taking part. Government officials and responders could build solutions and tools out of readily available components and material. And all submissions had to include any associated materials, such as underlying code, design files, schematics, or circuit boards, and detailed instructions, importantly, to allow others to easily build them too. The third thing is that the open source technology can play a hugely important role in accelerating the response and recovery of a country or a community. And it's important to stress that our focus was not on therapeutic solutions such as ventilators and PPE, as these were already being developed by others, especially by the medical community. So we first focused our efforts on 7 countries: Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, and Uganda. And we started by mandating that all innovations had to be super low tech. Any submission needed to be built from components that were readily available. And in fact, most solutions could be built for less than $50. Also, every submission had to be open source, including no IP hold, so the tool or device could be replicated quickly in any setting. And because all submissions are open source, they can be manufactured or built by anyone. So this creates possibilities for entrepreneurs or small business owners to sell these solutions locally. So we had a lot of submissions that really got to grips with our new world of social distancing, thinking about 3D printed handheld utility tools that help users press buttons or open door handles or use touch screens and more without actually touching them. And we hope these innovations can support these economies badly hit by COVID-19, creating new products that respond to a public health emergency and fill a market need. So the pandemic is moving quickly, and so we needed to move fast too. So in response to this, we made this a rolling challenge. So we set up rotating panels of experts in tech, development, and healthcare to evaluate solutions as they were submitted and identify the most promising ones, which we awarded as weekly impact winners. The idea was to get these moving on the ground as fast as possible. We couldn't run a program that waited weeks or months before announcing or implementing innovation. And this rolling aspect was interesting to watch too from a global perspective. We saw how the submissions changed as the burdens around the world, or at least the perceived burdens of COVID-19 changed. For example, when we launched the challenge in mid-April, the submissions were really focused on personal protection. Examples like the 3D printed face shield, mask disinfection device I mentioned earlier. But then a few weeks later, the submission shifted as the world, different regions were first addressing the first waves of the pandemic, and then started implementing things like social distancing. So a good example of this is a touchless water and soap dispenser submitted by an innovator in Nigeria. In fact, the rolling element of our challenge was so successful that we extended the deadline by 2 weeks to allow others to submit solutions. And some countries are now moving towards tentative reopening or recovery phases. And given this, we're seeing many more submissions, such as like the big red button, which could help elderly family and friends navigate the new world of video calling, and others focused on maintaining safe distancing practices in a workplace or public place as countries start to reopen a bit. Second, we identified partners that could make a challenge of this scale happen at scale and be effective. And so our main platform partner has been Hackster, a global innovator community with more than 1 million members around the world.
We started this project with the UNDP. The idea was that we can recruit and organize a large international event. We also got a lot of industry support. Companies like Intel and Microsoft, Amazon, Google, NVIDIA, and many others.
We also brought on tech and makerspace companies, including Amazon Web Services, Google, the Things industries, to spread the word, but also to provide some important funding in the beginning, and also technology itself, the components, and even digital service credits to kickstart innovation efforts. We hope these partners will also continue with us in countries like Egypt, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, and Uganda to help commercialize and scale the best solutions we come up with. Our tech partners were also essential in identifying winners, of course, as part of the weekly judging panels. So, what happens next? We were super pleased that participants came from more than 130 countries around the world, and of these, nearly half came from low or lower middle income countries, and more than half too came from countries outside of North America and Europe. We had over 200 submissions, and virtually all of these, just so that it's really clear, were fully fledged and detailed designs, not ideas, but fully fledged and detailed designs. And these likely represent thousands of design and engineering efforts from innovators all around the world. A great thing was that so many of the solutions were developed in countries where the needs were really greatest, like the countries we mentioned, like Uganda, like Tanzania, like Sri Lanka, to respond much more precisely to their specific local challenges. Our friends at Hackster have run challenges and programs like this to provide solutions for some of the biggest names in technology. And Hackster says that this challenge itself has generated the most enthusiastic response around the world and the most promising solutions by far. So we're really pleased by this too.
Incredibly, it has been one of our most successful contests to date, with over 2,000 participants and close to 300 submissions of ideas of how to help detect and protect COVID-19 pandemic spread, as well as contamination.
All of this has really been the easier part, right? The even harder part is about actually implementing these solutions in the countries where they're needed at scale, right? Where they're needed to really support response and recovery efforts. We're working with folks in these countries with UNDP's Accelerator Labs, and the Accelerator Labs are a global network of innovators focused on exploration and experimentation, and they're across 60 countries in the developing world. We're also connecting them with local tech ambassadors from the Hackster community to share tech expertise, knowledge, networks, and manage the actual implementation on the ground. So to make all this happen, first, each of the teams in these countries reviewed weekly challenge finalists to identify which solutions were most relevant for the local context. Next, we shipped the appropriate tools and materials to maker spaces in communities around the world so they can build these global solutions locally from scratch. These materials included 3D printers, filament, soldering stations, motion sensors, microcontroller units, and a lot more. So here it's worth remembering that not all of our initial countries were, of course, starting from zero. Not at all. For example, in Sri Lanka, they just done a similar innovation challenge. And this was a great opportunity for us to complement the excellent work already happening and providing these innovators with solutions, schematics and materials to combine with their own ideas.
We engage with a lot of young people in Sri Lanka. We do a lot of programs related to innovation, social innovation, and social entrepreneurship as well. I would say it is really interesting to see that a lot of effective and impactful solutions coming out of COVID-19 Detect and Protect Challenge. And also, with the initial discussions, it was decided that a few of the solutions will be implemented in Sri Lanka with the involvement of the Hackster community in Sri Lanka. It has been in the process, so now I think the tools and the required materials are being shipped to Sri Lanka to start the implementation or the testing of these solutions.
So all the elements in this process are about building local capacity, supply chains, and small-scale enterprises within communities.
It's important for the world, period. People need to be able to share ideas and build from other people's ideas. That's how innovation happens. And especially when you have a pandemic, no single country or company should hold back information that can help human lives and make other people's lives better. So the idea that you can actually open source information, open source technology, and let others iterate and build from it and continue to open source what they've built is critical.
We certainly don't have a fixed kind of roadmap for what scaling will look like. We're definitely still learning. We'll support together with our tech partners in any way that we can, and meanwhile, local communities will be the ones identifying which solutions are most suited to scale. We're super excited to see how this all turns out, including which solutions end up in marketplaces or communities across the developing world. And so what did we learn from all this? At least so far, we're still in the middle of it, but we've seen firsthand how important iteration and flexibility are in terms of deadline extensions, to shipping materials to countries, to understanding the solutions that communities really need, and working with national, international partners. And we've also had to think, bigger picture holistically from the beginning. And from the outset, we realized that this work could not be just standalone. Everything before, during, and crucially after is important to think about. We could have run just a short challenge, shared the winners on social media, and then moved on, right? Just sort of stopped at the idea stage in a sense. But we tried to build a process that helps in a small way to grow the local innovation ecosystem with real solutions. This is how we started to shape a new way of doing international development. We went from global crowdsourcing across more than 130 countries through to the most local innovation and collaboration in just a few short weeks. And we're going to continue to refine this approach as the COVID-19 challenge evolves. Truly, the time for global collaboration linked with local action is right now. And we hope that many of these ideas, innovations, and ways of producing fast solutions will help us defeat this pandemic together.